All right, we're live. Great. Well, happy Mother's Day, Lester. Great calendar holiday. Talked to my mom earlier. If she's watching out there, hi, Mom. Happy Mother's Day. And I'll allow you to do the same to the mother in your life.
Yeah, my wife and my two daughters are mothers, so they're not going to watch. They don't care about the Bears, but I'm going to make sure I do shout them out just in case. So Serena, Janelle, Brittany, love you. Happy Mother's Day.
Yeah, I always forget that you have grandkids.
Yeah, I'm old, man.
You tweeted out from a flag football game today,
Yes.
and I was like, oh, man, like you just can't get around it. But that is a wonderful story. Would you care to share what you tweeted out earlier today?
So it's funny because I just found out this weekend that my grandson's in flag football. I had no idea. I tell my daughter, I'm like, "What are you doing?" I used to coach football, and this is the first I'm hearing. Oh, he's been in it for a couple weeks. This is their second game. Like, what the hell are you doing? And the thing is, they live with us. It's like, how
Yeah.
do you not tell me these things? So anyway, he plays football for the Chargers. It's an NFL sponsored flag football league. It's really cool that all the teams are NFL teams. So we get there, and I'm thinking to myself, I hope he's not playing the Bears because that's rough. We get there,
What are
sure
the
enough,
odds?
he's playing the Bears. So it's like, man, I love you, but I am going to be rooting for the Bears just because Navy and Orange all the way. The Chargers actually won the game on a last-second interception to seal the game. So it was a fun game. I think these were like 6 and 7 year olds, so they're really little guys. So it was a fun game. I haven't been to a youth football game since I stopped coaching youth football a long time ago.
It's a lot of fun. Back when I was playing, they didn't have flag football. I wish they did because that would have been a lot of fun. I had a decent arm, like, until we got to high school, and then I was too fat to play quarterback. So, back then I might have actually been able to, play some organized flag football quarterback, and I would have been too slow to play, receiver or anything like that. They would have, it would have been like a Jason Witten situation, just kind of, catch a button hook and fall down or something. But that's fun. That's cool to see that. More entertaining than T-ball. I mean, it has to be, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
I think it was like 5-on-5 or 6-on-6. No linemen. It was basically a center, a quarterback, and I think three backs type receivers. So it was, it's very basic stuff. Just kind of here's the ball, run. That's pretty much what it was. So the kids were more interested in the mud on the ground and the dandelions, but every now and again they would get engaged, and the coaches were fired up, and the fans were fired up, and it was like I said, it was the first time I've been to a youth game like that in a long time, and it was cool to see all the parents, all the kids out there, all having fun playing football.
yeah, that's and at that age, you're just hoping to spark the joy
Yeah,
of the game, and I mean, football's a tough sport. I mean,
yeah,
I think anybody that played it at any level, once you start getting the pads on, and getting hit doesn't always feel very good, and in a way, you have to be a little bit crazy to want to play that game.
yeah.
But it can also be really hard, and it can kind of shy people away from it, and I think something like that can really stoke the fires, and I think that's just for the better. And you don't really need to have any contact
Nah,
until, I mean,
yeah.
honestly, you don't really need to have any contact till high school.
At
Um,
that age, it's all about having fun. It's all
yeah,
about just learning the basic stuff about the game. And I mean, if you understand that if you have the football in your hand, you go towards the end zone. At this age, that's really all they know. So that's
right,
that's really all
right.
you need. So I mean, it was fun. It was cool. I'm kind of like you. There's really no point in being physical till you get older. The bodies are all developed at different levels at that age. So
Right.
like when I coached mostly seventh and eighth graders, and I had some eighth graders that they look like men, and I had some kids that look like really real little kids, and they're all on the same field together. So it was just kind of weird how their bodies kind of develop at different levels.
Yeah, I remember the guy, and his name was Seth Thorpe, and eighth grade, he had like a chest hair, like full like chest hair,
Yeah,
and I don't understand how that's possible, right? I mean, he was just everybody else did not have that, and he was just man, but then like he just didn't grow after that, right? So he's a big guy in eighth grade, and then that was it. So well, anyway, here's what we're doing today, guys. So in a couple minutes here, we'll crank up a podcast, and then we're gonna welcome in a couple of college experts to talk about a couple of the Bears draft picks. Both Big Ten guys. They are going to be separated. I didn't know if Illinois and Penn State had a rivalry game. I was trying to think of like, is there a rivalry trophy between these two teams? Apparently they don't. I guess that Illinois isn't really that good at football very often, so maybe they don't
It's
they're
been
not
a
good enough.
while, yeah.
Yeah, they're not good enough to have a rivalry with Penn State, since I guess they haven't been in the Big Ten that long, relative to the overall history. But we're going to talk about Doug Kramer. We're going to talk about Jaquan Brisker, and we got a few things prepared to talk about those two guys. And if you have any questions, pop them in the comments. We'll get to that. If you have any questions for us, we'll stick around for a little Q&A afterwards. But these two gentlemen are going to come in. They'll be in and out in like a 15-minute type session, and we'll get good conversation about both of these draft picks. And if you guys like this, we'll try to do more of them. We'll try to line up some college guys and see if we can get a good sense of where everything's at. If you're watching us on YouTube and you haven't subscribed to Second City Gridiron YouTube, please do so. We're trying to get up to 1,000 subs by the time the season starts. We're about halfway there. It'd be really cool if we can get you on board. Doing a lot of stuff on this channel, and that'll be great, for Bears content all year round, and particularly as we get cranked up closer to the season. So anything before we start, Lester?
No, it's good. I mean, we have a lot of cool stuff planned for the channel this summer, but then of course, once the season starts, we're going to be, full on Bears 2022 season. So we're excited for the direction we're heading as a brand.
I mean, it's not that far away. That's the crazy thing, right? Yeah. I mean, it's just not that far away. It's already May. After the draft feels like a dead period to a lot of people, but it's almost like get your stuff in, because football's going to take over your life again soon. You didn't watch Game of Thrones. You weren't a Game of Thrones guy, right?
I did. I watched it up to the last season.
Okay, well, you probably quit at the right time.
Well, I still have like 3 or 4 episodes to go. Everyone said it was just so bad. I'm like, man, I'm going to do it at some point. But I have not finished the entire season.
Well, the Stark family saying of winter is coming. It's the football saying should just be football is coming, because eventually it will. And it's just it dominates our calendar. I'm really excited about it. Just it's cool to get past the draft, because now you're just guys are in camp, right? Yeah. There's a rookie mini camp. You have a story up on Windy City Gridiron about the offensive line rookies being able to fill out a full 5 and what that looked like and where they're at, and projecting them into the roster. And that's really cool. I mean, it's real football stuff. It's not hypothetical anymore. They're actually on something resembling a football field, and taking something resembling snaps, which is pretty cool.
It's ready. It's right here. The camp just ended, and the next one is I think in 2 weeks. So it's coming.
All right. Well, let's pause for a second, and let's start recording the podcast. Welcome to Bear and Balance. I'm Jeff Berckes, a writer for Windy City Gridiron, and I'm joined, as always, by Lester A. Wiltfong Jr. Lester, happy Mother's Day to you. The draft is passed. We've got a couple guys that we're going to talk about today. I'm really excited. What about you?
All the same way, JB. It's the draft is the draft is over. The Bears had 11 picks and then another 17, 18 guys for the UDFA market. So, this roster churn has already started to happen.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about a couple of the draft picks. We're going to start, as we always do. We always start in the trenches. It worked out really well that we get to do that again here. We are starting with a conversation about the new center for the Bears, Doug Kramer out of Illinois. We're going to have an Illinois expert in here in a second. And I wanted to start off by sharing a couple of things that I'm really into. I'm into this relative athletics score from Math Bomb on Twitter. Kentley Platty is a good dude. I've met him a couple times, talked to him a few times. I'm using his stuff a lot, and I want to make sure I'm giving him credit, because it's really cool stuff. But I want to share Doug Kramer's relative athletic score. And so what this does, and so for you that are listening that can't see this, there's a score that's calculated based on testing numbers and based on measurables. So, height, weight, bench press, 40-yard dash, vertical jump, broad jump, things like that. Those are all compared against historical drafted players or undrafted free agents that catch on with teams that went through the pre-draft process, and they're ranked against them, that position group. And Doug Kramer is quite the athlete, which was a little bit of a surprise when I first pulled up his RAS. And I'm comparing him on this first chart for those of you that are viewing on the YouTube to Sam Mustipher, which this is not to pick on Sam. We both have talked about how Sam has done very well for himself and where he was drafted, and we like Sam Mustipher. It's just that clearly Ryan Poles was telling us that this was not the type of offensive lineman that he was looking for, and you can see a stark difference between Doug Kramer's relative athletic score and Sam Mustipher's. Doug Kramer's big score is 8.47, and it's lit up green, which means that it's in the top 20% of offensive center prospects. And Sam Mustipher's relative athletic score is a 0.90, which is a blinking red light, which is not good.
It's the athletic profile. It's a 10-point scale, which just kind of makes the RAS kind of nice. It's really easy to understand, and again, when you look at a guy like Doug Kramer, two of his red marks on here are height and weight. He's 6'2", 299, which is a little small for the NFL, but all his other numbers are green or yellow, which is pretty good. So the height and weight brings his overall number down quite a bit. If it wasn't for that, which I think that's something he'll have to, he'll have to add some size in the NFL, but I mean, from an athletic profile, like it shows here, he fits what the Bears want to do.
Yeah. And I also have another one that I pulled up. And again, so those of you that are watching on YouTube can see this. And if you're listening to this, thank you. Also, maybe check us out on YouTube as we're going to try to pull in some visuals over the year. This is Doug Kramer against the free agent that was signed, Lucas Patrick. And I think you can see what Ryan Poles liked here is that Doug Kramer is very similar to what Lucas Patrick was coming out in 2016 out of Duke. Similar scores. Lucas Patrick, a little bit of a better athlete, a little bit bigger of a guy. But you wonder if they're looking to try to make their own Lucas Patrick out of Doug Kramer.
I mean, that makes sense. I mean, that's what the Packers did when the Packers got Patrick. He wasn't a day one guy. It took him some time to really find his niche on the roster. And, with Patrick, he played some guard, he played some center. And I think with Cramer at some point, he'll have to show an ability to go play some guard as well. I think in college, it was mostly center. We'll find out more in a little while here. But I think that he'll, in order, to bolster what he brings his value to an NFL team, you got to play more than just one position on the interior.
Yeah, it's interesting. Talking to EJ Snyder about Doug Kramer, he had watched some Illinois offensive line tape for one of their other players, and they had a tackle that he was interested in, and he was like, "Yeah, Kramer didn't really stand out to me."
Yeah.
And and you've heard some things from our other colleague Bill, who is kind of Doug Kramer seems to spend a lot of time on the ground. And not so much impressing him and leaping off the film. So we'll see what Drew has to say here. But any final thoughts before we welcome Drew in?
Sounds good. Let's keep things rolling.
All right. So we are happy to be joined here by Drew, and I'm gonna take a shot at your name, but please correct me. Drew Pastorek.
Close. Pastorek, close.
Pastorek. Okay.
Emphasis on the middle syllable there. You're pretty close to.
Yeah. Well, apologies. I figured I'd take a shot, but you
good.
are from the Champagne Room.
Yes.
So Illinois guy, welcome to Bear and Balance.
Thanks for having me, guys. Really appreciate it. As a Bears fan and an Illini fan, this is kind of cool. So
nice.
Happy to be here.
Special interest for a guy like Cramer to be able to make the leap from Illini to Bear, or does it give you a little extra special incentive to cheer for a guy like that?
I think it does. I mean, you saw what happened when Cole Kmet got drafted a couple of years ago, right? I mean, like the whole town had like a parade for him. I mean, it was like, you don't know what's going to happen long term. Of course, he might not even make the team. We don't know. He might be the next Olin Kreutz. He might be a guy that doesn't make it out of camp. We never know. But I think, especially for me, someone who is on both sides of it, an Illini fan and a Bears fan, you can't help but root for him. And, I think based on what you guys were talking about a little bit earlier, he seems to fit the profile of a guy Ryan Poles likes. He's moldable. He might not be versatile in the sense that he can play guard or center. He might be kind of locked into one spot. He might be a center only guy, but I mean, Olin Kreutz was pretty damn good as just a center only guy. So I'm not saying he's Olin Kreutz, but I mean, the framework is there. He's a little, average size, but like the tables and the stuff you were just talking about, I mean, he's played in a run-oriented offense for 5 years. He's a really good run blocker, and he's been able to, showcase that he's tough, he's gritty. I wrote some stuff down. So,
oh man, gritty, boy,
gritty.
George McCaskey was sold.
Go prep, baby. So he doesn't have that, elite, quickness or agility that you might see from a first or second round pick, obviously. But, 5-year starter, started 48 games at Illinois. Regardless of how good Illinois has been over that time period, like you're a 5-year starter at a Power 5 school, like it's worth noting.
It's a lot of experience. That's good.
Yeah,
for him,
absolutely. 3-time All Big Ten, 3-time academic All Big Ten. Like, so, I mean, he's the goods. He's the real deal. Like, he's the kind of guy you want in your locker room. He might not be a 10, 15-year pro. He might not be an all-pro player, but he's definitely the type of guy that's a vocal leader. He leads by example. Brett Bielema said at some point during the year, he mentioned, he alluded to he and Jake Hansen, who was another a linebacker that was an undrafted free agent with the Texans, that, those two guys, when they talked, people listened to them. Like they, what they say, the message they brought carries weight. And this is a new regime. I don't want to say it's a rebuild. I don't really think it's a rebuild, but you're starting over with a new GM, new coaching staff. I mean, those are the kind of guys that you want, guys that are going to give you that buy-in, guys that are going to work their asses off, and, whatever he lacks in the, physical traits, he's going to make up for those intangibles and being tough and being ready to learn and absorb.
Well, you talk about the physical, the athletic ability is there, right? I mean, that shows in the testing. The undersizedness being that he's, only 6'2".
Right. He's not 6'5".
But that's for a center. That's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have that much of an issue. 300 pounds is pretty light. But that's, professional strength, not light for a lot of us, but, light for an offensive lineman in the professional league, that's a little on the light side, but that's also what I think Ryan Poles is looking for, right? He's looking for a little bit of a smaller line in that scheme that he thinks can work. And so I'm not totally, too worried about that part of it. I think he needs some time to get in and get some, professional work with the nutritionist and all that kind of stuff to get his body where he needs to be. But not too worried about that piece of it. You mentioned something about the 5-year starter, which is awesome. Type of guy that you want in the locker room. Was he a team captain at all, or how do you know that part of it?
Yeah, he was a 3-time team captain. So it goes back to what I said earlier. 2 different coaching staffs, 2 different regimes, 2 completely different philosophies. And, players, listened to him, believed in him. They saw those results on the field. He just delivered all the time. Like I said, he might not wow you on film or with the measurables, but he's going to be a really hardworking guy. And, he's going to be dependable and stable and, 3-time captain. And, last time I checked, the center quarterback relationship is pretty important. So that might be something that works out well. I want to say it was like 11 or 12 quarterbacks. It probably wasn't, but it felt like it.
It sounds, yeah.
There were, especially during the Lovey years, there was, some years they had 3 or 4 in a same season. So, I mean, there was a lot of instability there, and a couple of constants was the offensive line, and Cramer was a big part of that. So I don't think he's going to have any problem adjusting. It's like, you're a stud in high school, right? You go to college and you're like, oh, everyone was a stud in high school. That's why we're here. You get to college, it's like, oh, everyone was pretty good in college. That's why we're here. So I think what you said is correct. Get him in the weight room, get him with, the nutritional staff and all of that. Illinois got one of the best in football. And they've got one of the best strength and conditioning programs in all of college football, in my opinion. Their facilities are great. So he's not, threadbare. He's not some guy coming in, that is a project that, maybe in 5 or 6 years you could, do something with him. He's going to be ready to play. And I don't think it'll take long for him to adapt to any scheme or anything like that. So, I mean, he's a smart kid, ready to go, and maybe not plug and play right away, but I think he fills a need there. I think he provides some depth to a position that has not performed as well as it could have been the last, couple of years.
Well, the Bears are coming off a guy in Sam Musford who was a former undrafted free agent. So, Bears fans have seen a guy that have kind of had those intangibles, as far as his football IQ, his understanding of the offense of line play, and they saw him kind of building stuff up to a point where he can get on the field. Now the Bears in the 6th round have taken a guy, very similar to that, where he has the smarts. He understands, the leadership stuff, what it takes to be on the line, and he has a little bit of a higher pedigree, a little bit of a higher athletic profile. So if Doug Kramer is a guy that can kind of come in, put his head down and go to work, and it sounds like that's the kind of guy he is. He could be a guy that could eventually be a starter for the Bears at center.
Yeah, I certainly think so. I mean, Illinois has had a lot of linemen. The last couple of years, they've had a couple that have stood out. Nick Allegretti, who plays for the Chiefs, is one of them. Another late round guy, stuck with it through a lot of lean times with the program. He found a groove in Kansas City, and, he's been sort of a swing, guard center. He's been a starter. He's been a backup guy. He's been a flex guy. Kendrick Green, another guy with the Steelers, who was, I think, a 3rd round draft pick. I mean, he was regarded a little highlier. I think his measurables were a little bit better. His overall performance as far as, run and pass blocking might have been a little bit better. But I mean, the Big Ten puts out a lot of linemen. You don't get to the Big Ten on the offensive line and stick around for 5 years and start 48 games because you can't play, because you can't do it. So I certainly think that he has potential. Obviously a lot can happen. You never know. But yeah, as we said at the start, as an Illinois fan watching him, seeing how bad the program was at points during the Lovey tenure, and then shifting to Brett Bielema, he likes a physical, downhill, smash mouth kind of game. And Lovey had some more, read option type stuff, had more mobile quarterbacks, whereas Brett Bielema wants the more, drop back style. So I think Justin Fields kind of combines those two, where obviously he can throw as well as anybody in the NFL, but can also have some escapability and mobility. And Cramer's shown the ability that he can move in that respect. He is a very good run blocker. So I think he meshes those two traits together pretty well, and, excited to see what he does in camp and moving forward. And, I think we'll be seeing him on the field at some point, in 2022. I really do.
You mentioned the, run blockings, kind of that's what you guys are doing, right? Mostly in the run game at Illinois. What was he expected to do? Was he, a lot of double teams kind of trying to dig out big nose tackles? Was he getting to the second level to try to get linebackers? Was he doing any center pulling or anything fun like that? What did you see out of him in terms of his responsibilities and what he was doing?
That's kind of tough for me as a 5'10", 170-pound guy.
Okay.
Here's what he's doing that you know.
Well, sometimes that can kind of, they'll highlight those center pulls if that happens. It's a little bit more advanced, but
And Illinois had kind of a 2-pronged thing last year. They had Chase Brown, who was more of a East-West, guy. And then Josh McCray was the bowling ball, 6'1", 240, like a Najee Harris kind of type build to him. So, I mean, I think he's flexible enough in the run game that he can handle both. From what I saw, and I'm not the tape guy. I don't sit and, parse and obsess over it. But I mean, he's been able to block for various types of runners throughout his career. So whether that's quarterback, whether that's, split out, whether it's, I formation, straight ahead. So, I mean, I think that whatever he's asked to do, he's got the tools and the smarts to make that work.
I think that points to his intelligence. He's able to kind of, thrive in two different schemes there. And then he's, of course, going to the NFL. Now he has a brand new scheme to learn here. But again, you talk about his leadership, his intelligence on the field. I think all of that points to it. Then he has 47, 48 games started in college. So all that bodes well for him moving forward. And again, we're talking about a 6th-round draft pick. I mean, these guys, the hit rate on these are 50-50 at best, so I mean, if worst case scenario, if he has to take some time on the practice squad, I think that's fine because, like we've talked about, the potential's there. If you're going to bet on a guy late in the draft, you either go with traits and then those traits are either athletic, which he has, or you look for someone that has the football IQ to really, grasp what he's learning here and move forward. And, Ryan Poles wants a certain kind of guy. They want that, like you said, the gritty guy. They want the guy that is tough-minded, but they also want a guy that is smart. And I think with Doug Kramer, he fits a lot of those intangibles that they want, which is why, as fans, we see the upside and we see it there.
Yeah, and I think, as you look at the Bears holistically last year, I mean, penalties, discipline was a big part of their issues. So you're like, don't even get me started. Interestingly enough, the NFL Network, I don't know if you'd seen this earlier today, they were showing that Bears-Steelers game from Monday night. And it was like every third play, there was like an offsides or a false start or a holding. So like discipline's been a huge issue for this team forever. And, he's going to be a guy that's going to be disciplined. He's going to stay focused. And, especially, being a center, you're having your hand on the ball all the time. So you've got to be mindful of that. And those traits we talked about, not just as a football player, but as a student athlete, he's ready to work. He's dependable. He's tough-minded. And I think he is the type of player that Ryan Poles would want. And as you mentioned, it's a lottery ticket situation. If you draft 5 guys in the 6th round, you hope that, maybe one of them makes the team and, makes a really positive impact. And look at around the league. I mean, most of the teams comprise of 5th, 6th, 7th round guys. It's not all, top 10 draft picks, 2nd round. I mean, these are, the glue guys that kind of hold your team together, that you build your team around. And, the offensive line, and you had, Jones and Carter, the other 2 draft picks that were more like projectable, that looked well, but they were from smaller schools. This is kind of the opposite. This is the guy who was at a Power 5 school and didn't maybe have the off the charts measurable stuff. He's more of a ready to go guy, whereas those other 2 might be more of a project, in my opinion. But yeah, take a swing. And, as I mentioned a couple of times, he's the guy you want in your locker room. He's going to absorb that information and he's going to make it work, and he's going to translate that and make it transmittable on the field with whoever, is under center.
Awesome stuff, Drew. Really appreciate it. I would wish the Illini good luck in the coming season, but to be honest with you, as a Hawkeye fan, I just don't really care.
And I live in Cedar Rapids, so
that's where I'm from.
I'm surrounded by black and gold.
Black and gold everywhere, man.
Yeah, everywhere. Oh, by the way, Illinois does not have a rivalry with Penn State, but they do have one with Ohio State, which is even odder to me.
That doesn't make any sense.
The Illabuck Trophy, if you haven't seen that, you got to Google that. It's like an otter turtle thing. I don't know where it came from.
It can't possibly be worse than the original Cyhawk Trophy when they re-engaged the Iowa State. That is the worst looking trophy I've ever seen in my life.
Bad.
So
and the Iowa Nebraska one was pretty bad too, though. Like, was that like the farmers like holding hands? Is that the Cyhawk one?
The Cyhawk was like a farmer kneeling and handing like a bounty. That was the original Cyhawk trophy, which is just
Lester, you got to Google it, man. It's like
I'm gonna have to go look at those. Yeah,
it makes every like awful trophy or awful bowl game just look tame in comparison. Really
and they, to their credit, they yanked it, and
they said,
not even for the first
let's
game.
get rid of it. Let's move on. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Drew, really appreciate the knowledge, really appreciate the time coming on Mother's Day and all that. We'll look forward to talking to you in the future to check up on your feelings about Doug Kramer starting center for the Bears in 2023.
They just got to put a 57 on him, right? That's the cure, right? That's the
key.
It'll make him ornery, that's for sure.
Definitely. Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Drew.
Thanks, Drew.
Talking to Drew, the one thing that I'm really kind of hearing is 5-year starter. He said 48 starts, and then you've got a guy who was a team captain for 3 years, and he mentioned academic all conference or academic all American, whatever. Okay, so you've got a guy who played a lot of football. You got a guy that is intelligent. He tested well. Again, the film might not be where you want it to be, but it's the genetic makeup of a guy that you want as that gritty guy that, hey, we think this guy's got a chance to learn from Lucas Patrick and maybe that starting center next year.
I kind of saw some of the same stuff that Bill saw, when I was watching some of the film. He does get on the ground, some of the stuff, but so, some of that can be cleaned up, with technique, but the experience is there. He definitely fits. He just fits. Like one thing I looked at when the Bears draft was over, I went to the bios, and a lot of the draft class and the guys that the Bears signed, former captains. They're involved in charities off the field. They're the kind of type of player and the type of human being that this organization wants to bring in. And I thought that was kind of cool because, they do have a type, not just from on the field, which is the stuff that you wrote about on the profile you did a couple weeks ago, but off field as well. As they want a guy that, are good for the community, that are good football players. And I think I think we're seeing that now with Ryan Poles.
Yeah, it's one thing for a new general manager or a new coach or whatever to come in and say, this is what we're building and we want culture and we're into this and we're into that. And then, you get that opportunity to bring that guy in that has a few red flags, but he's really good at football.
Yeah.
And that story that they tell you at the beginning sort of goes out the window, and they start bringing in these guys that, don't really reflect the type of culture or what we feel like our locker room that we've built can handle a guy like this. And then, things implode. Like, we're going to bring in Martellus Bennett and Brandon Marshall and everything's going to be, and Jay Cutler's the quarterback and everything's going to be fine. Right. And eventually it's just a powder keg, right? It's going to blow up on you. And so I wanted to mention another thing. We talked about Olin a little bit, and I'm not going to talk about that stuff with Olin, but one of the things that Olin really defended about Sam Mustipher was just how good he was at the mental processing piece, be able to see, the defense and call out protections and
the line set. Yeah, that's key for a center. You have to understand the pass pro. I mean, it's all about the pass pro at the NFL level. If the center can take that responsibility, and it's not something the quarterback has to be, really worried about. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the quarterback has final call. So when it's set, if something happens, something changes, the quarterback has to make that change. But it's the center, the smart centers, they got to get things set quickly.
Yeah, it's the guys that have been around for a long time. They have to be able to do that. Sometimes a quarterback, especially a veteran quarterback, they can take the pressure off of a young guy, and they can make the line calls. And some of those quarterbacks prefer it, right? Like that they want to be the ones that are making the line calls. But most of these guys that have been around a long time, these centers that stick around, from the mental aspect, that's what they're doing. That they are the ones that are making those line calls. And if a guy like Cramer has, and again, an academic all conference, academic American, that could just mean that he's really good at whatever he majored in, and that doesn't necessarily always translate onto football smarts. But if there is a bit of some correlation there, where if you're a smart guy, generally you can translate that onto the field. So hopefully that's something that he's going to be able to do. And he won't be allowed on the field until he gets there, but that's something I'm looking for. But I think that profile, we don't have enough data. It's only one draft, and it's only one free agency period. But that profile that we're starting to build about what Ryan Poles wants to do here, I think there's some valuable information in this draft class. And like you said, a lot of team captains, a lot of guys that are involved in the community. We've got an academic performer here. That stuff's I'm starting to tally that.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense. I mean, Matt Eberflus wants, his hits principle. It's hustle. It's all about going, 100% at all times when you're on the field. And yes, that's for his defense, but he also wants that for his offense as well. This is which kind of goes in lockstep with Ryan Poles. He wants his O line, play through the whistle kind of mentality, and that goes with the hits principle. So, if you're seeing this, the head coach and the GM, they both have the exact same idea. And the more we've learned here, we kind of see why Poles picked this head coach. We see how their philosophies kind of mesh, and it makes a lot of sense. As fans looking now, like, yeah, I can see why they got the coach, they have the players, the guys in free agency. It's all the, it'll be so cool at some point in a few years. We look back and say, oh yeah, that's a Bears guy in the draft. When the
Right.
Bears pick a guy, you're like, that's the guy. Of course, that's a Bears guy. I mean, that's going to be so cool at some point if the Bears can get their franchise to a point where we're seeing that as fans. Because when you have that, then you do have that culture. The culture that permeates through the entire organization. They all have the same, the same goals. They're all going the same direction. And like you talked about, then at that point, maybe you do, roll the dice for the guy that comes in with a couple flags, maybe, but where this young roster is now, they're not in a position to do that. And that could be why we saw them, and a few other teams passing a guy like George Pickens in the draft, because, there were a few question marks. And, seeing that now, we're like, yeah, I guess that does make sense why they would pass on him and go with a guy like Velus Jones, who, so far through the first mini camp, he seems like, he fits all the profiles, from an
Right.
athletic standpoint, really smart guy, he comes, ready to work. So, you can see it. It's starting to show.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Again, it's not, you don't have enough data where you can say, like, I know exactly the types of guys that he's going to go after. But if he continues down this path, it does create a profile, and it's something that we can use as a little bit of a predictor tool, right? Where it's like, in the past, he hasn't been willing to sacrifice what he's building to take a guy like George Pickens. A lot of teams weren't, by the way.
Yeah,
Right. I mean, that
you fell, yeah.
all the Bears fans, me included, was
Me
like,
included.
hey, George Pickens, 39, let's do it. And clearly there were some issues. Yeah, that at least perceived issues by the general manager and general managers of a lot of teams. Fine. Right. We don't know that. We aren't in on the interviews. We're not privy to the medical reports, right? And we can only evaluate so much. But I was struck by what you said in terms of, well, that's a Bears guy. That's a Bears pick, right? And thinking about some of these longtime general managers, like Howie Roseman with the Eagles, or like Ozzie with the Ravens, right?
Yeah.
Where the Ravens just did it with Ozzie's not there. It's not Eric DaCosta, but their first round. They take a couple guys, and it's like, it's just such a Ravens pick. They took the best player. They just they got the guy that they want. They're going to fit perfect. That guy's going to be a 10, 12-year starter for them. And it just makes sense, right? It's just their approach, how they do things. People just know, like, that's the Ravens. Be nice if it was like, man, dang, the Bears got a good one. They what the Bears are doing, and they stick to their philosophy, and they keep plugging guys in that fit the system.
Yeah, I mean, that's the goal. The ultimate goal is a franchise to have that long-term guy, that long-term success, the Patriot way, so to speak, about what they do as organization. And it didn't happen with Pace, didn't happen before with Emery, Jerry Angelo before that. I mean, it just hasn't been the sustained success in this organization. It's been a long time. I mean, I'm a bit older than you, so I remember back when there was a Bear way, when there was a Bear philosophy, when they did have that. It's been a long time.
I mean, that had to be way back, right? What are you talking about? Like,
well, I mean, like the 80s, they had a lot of sustained success. The drafts they had there, they had the defensive mindset. They had Peyton at the tailback, so they had a nice philosophy, a nice run in the 80s. Only one title, but as far as a fan, cheering for a team where they're always in the playoff mix. I mean, that's all we can ask for. If we can get the Bears to a point where every year they're in the mix, I mean, the Packers, I mean, a lot of Bears fans will make jokes about, the Packers have like, what, 2 titles in the last 30 years? So
I'd kill for that.
But they're always in the mix. They're
Right.
always in the playoffs. They always got a shot, and that's, man, as fans, that's all we want. I mean, yes, I want, multiple titles.
Sure.
That's not realistic. That's the Patriots. That's Tom Brady. That doesn't happen very often. So if you can have a team that's always there, always competing, that's all we can ask for.
Yeah, I would just like one, I'm not going to get greedy. I'm like, I want 5, right? Well, I want to talk about Jaquan Brisker, and we're going to welcome our second guest on here in a little bit.
You want to take a quick commercial break for the pod?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's pay some bills. Let's let somebody pay for the drinks later on tonight. All right, Lester. So let's talk about Jaquan Brisker. So I'm excited about this guy. I'm excited. I'm excited to hear a little bit more about him. I want to do the same thing we did with Cramer. I'm going to share relative athletic score, and I'm going to set up Clay here. We're going to bring on here in a minute, but relative athletic score, and I pulled Adrian Amos, Penn State alum as well, and man, they're similar. They're both really athletic. Brisker's a little taller and a little leaner, a little fat, and a decent amount faster, but very similar athletically. And I just think of how well Amos and Brisker work together on the back end. Amos and Eddie Jackson work together in the back end. And if Brisker can allow Jackson to return to form, I mean, this is one of those picks that may be making other guys better.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the first thing that jumped off to me was like, oh man, not just because they're both from Penn State, but this could be a pretty nice addition to really tie that secondary together.
Well, this is the comp that a lot of Bears fans make because, the last time the Bears had 2 quality safeties was when it was Eddie Jackson and Amos. So if Brisker can bring some of the same stuff that we saw with Amos, I mean, that's a win. With a guy like Amos, he was, I believe, a 5th-round draft pick, so no one really expected him to have that. He did not have the same pedigree that the Bears have now in Brisker. Brisker, the upside is way higher than it was with Amos. Amos has had a hell of a career. He's made a ton of money. He's had some Pro Bowls, so he is, he maximized his talent. He did everything he could with it. He's on a good path. Brisker, though, man, the sky's the limit. And you hear some fans talk about the value of a safety in the second round. And I get that, because there's, but you have to look at how the board was stacked. And it's at some point, we're assuming as fans that Brisker was pretty high on their board, and yes, the value may not be there as a safety, but once they get on the field, once we see how he performs, all that goes out the window. The draft status, I don't care about it. Pretty much in my mind, draft status is done now. They're pros now. Get on the field, get a camp, perform. And if he does that and he wins a job as a starter day 1, which I think he has a good shot at doing that's a pretty damn good draft pick.
Heck yeah. And it really makes the Crookshank pickup in free agency make a little bit more sense. That's a guy that you can bring in on a big nickel situation. And I compared him on Bears Over Beers. I said it was like the Big Lebowski, the dude's rug. It just really ties the room together. I really feel like this guy's tying the secondary together. I'm really excited about it. But well, without further ado, Lester, let's bring on our next guest, Clay. Name that I'm not quite sure how to pronounce, but let's try it. Sauertieg.
Close enough. That works.
Okay. Clay writes for Penn State Rivals and GBT Sports. Welcome to Bear and Balance.
Thanks for having me, guys. Glad you reached out. Looking forward to talk some Jaquan Brisker. Fantastic player, also a fantastic kid. Always nice to know when you're getting a good guy in the room. And looking forward to kind of chatting it up with you guys.
Well, I talked a little bit about their athletic profiles and how, Adrian Amos, also a Nittany Lion, and how they kind of reminded me of each other. But you just mentioned right off the top that he's a really good guy. And this is a recurring theme with Chicago Bears draft picks under the new general manager, Ryan Poles. Can you expand on that a little bit? Tell us, why that was one of the first things that you wanted to talk about with Jaquan Brisker.
Yeah, it's just, he's somebody I've been around the program last handful of years since he's been as a beat writer, gotten the chance to talk to Jaquan a number of years. Really humble kid, really hardworking. I know there was some issues with some comments made, but again, I think the point there being a very hardworking guy who loves football, very thoughtful in his answers, not a lot of one-word answers in terms of post-game interviews. Happy to talk about the game as much as his development, a really good relationships guy. I mean, we had Penn State just had its blue-white game, and they're going to have a safety coming out next year named Jair Brown, who's going to be probably a second, third-round pick, who talked about how much Jaquan helped him grow, not just at Penn State, but his teammates beforehand at Lackawanna Community College. I think that's another big thing. People sometimes look at JUCO guys and go, well, your grades, what's the issue there? But to me, it shows that his growth. Did everything he needed to do at Lackawanna to get here. Came to Penn State and was immediately a very useful player. Made huge strides between his first year and second year, and then second year and third year. And I think that there might even be another level there. A very intelligent player. I really think that in the modern NFL, particularly in sub packages where he can come down and play against the run, you're getting a heck of a player.
Yeah, you mentioned him coming down to the box, and he's not the biggest of guy, but when you watch him on film, he will stick his nose in there, he will set the edge, he will do whatever it takes, he will fill that gap. And I think from a physical standpoint, he has all that what it takes to be in the NFL.
Yeah, to me, it's not only that he has the sideline speed, but he's not the type of guy too that's going to run himself out of plays. I mean, he's diagnoses quick and he makes a beeline to the ball. He's not going to get lost in terms of play action or counter action or things like that. A very heavy player to go along with the athletic ability. And I heard you mention before I came on positional value. I think had it not been for the lack of positional value for a safety, he's a first-round level prospect towards the back end there.
Yeah, it's interesting. On my other podcast host, EJ Snyder, who really gets into the scouting aspect of all of this, he said that Brisker was the most scheme agnostic safety in the draft, meaning that he could have gone anywhere and been successful because his reps were split, coming down into the box and filling in the run fits. He was, covering tight ends, carrying them up the field. He's able to sit back as a free safety. Is that how they used him at Penn State? Was that, is that basically a position for your defense where, you want a safety that can be that versatile, or was it because of Brisker that they were able to do all those different things?
I would say a very dynamic player. I would say in his junior year, he had to be more of that free safety role because the safety playing opposite him was not quite as strong. This year, he had the advantage of working with Jair Brown, who I mentioned, who I think is going to be an NFL player. Could come up in the box, was a fantastic blitzer, could make plays around the line of scrimmage, but he's also able to drop back in coverage, to diagnose plays, to kind of carry guys up the field. The interception numbers don't show that way, but he wasn't thrown towards a lot. Had a big interception towards the end of the game against Wisconsin that sealed that. Had a number of big plays, run stops to keep them in games against Ohio State and against Michigan. A very, very versatile player who I think most times you'd like him to be able to kind of get up around there and cause havoc, whether it's blitzing or against the run, but is very, very capable in coverage as well.
Yeah, that's the NFL these days. You have to cover. I know a lot of fans, they want to think you want a traditional free safety and a traditional strong safety, but that's not always the case. I mean, in the modern NFL, both guys have to cover. And I know a lot of Bears fans will look at a guy like Eddie Jackson, and he's not the most physical guy. His tackle comments that he's made in the past have not been the best comments to make, but he will stick his nose in there on occasion, but he is better used in a different role. But I think with the pairing of these two, it really brings the entire secondary together. Of course, the Bears also have Gordon, who they got, a previous pick in the second round. So the Bears secondary overall, it's one of the most improved position groups in the entire team.
And Brisker to me is, I saw you mentioned the RAS there was 199 at the combine. He played probably closer to 205, 210. So I don't know whether he was dropping weight there for a 40 time. But he'll play a little bigger than that, and it's not going to be an issue against the run. He's not afraid to stick his nose in there. He was injured a little bit, but never miss time. He had a shoulder injury early on against Wisconsin, and I don't think he missed a game throughout the year and didn't miss many snaps. So the toughness issue is not an issue there. Really, really well adjusted to today's game in terms of his versatility. And like I said, a smart player. He's not going to run himself out of plays. He's not going to know what his assignments are. I really think that that's something that it wouldn't shock me if we find out that he came in and absolutely aced interviews.
Yeah, I think that's a recurring theme that we're seeing out of this draft class. I like to call these types of players agents of chaos because they basically act as like a queen on the chessboard where you can really maneuver them around the field and really give yourself a lot of flexibility. So that's why I'm really excited about Brisker. You mentioned that in your answer before this that he maybe didn't have the interception numbers that you might want, the eye-popping numbers or something like that, but he wasn't really thrown to. I'm curious if you can remember back to Amos, if he was like this in college, because in the pros, Amos didn't really make a lot of the splash plays, but he was always in the right position. Like he saw the field well, he knew his position, and he always just was in the right place at the right time. And that's why he always got really high grades for PFF, was because he was just a smart player. And so, but he didn't make those big interceptions or anything like that in the pros. What kind of turnover ability do you see Brisker having? Either, does he have the ball skills to go up and get it if he's in coverage and has an opportunity? And does he force fumbles at all?
And to me, I think that you mentioned the Amos thing. He had the advantage of starting his career at corner and then playing free safety and then playing strong safety at Penn State. So he came in, I think, with that knowledge that was very, very useful for Brisker. If the play's there to be made, he's gonna make it. He has good hands. I don't think he's going to be chasing interceptions, which I think is, to me, can be a good thing. You're not going to get burnt. He's physical enough to stick his hat in there and force fumbles. He'll get it under the pile. Again, I don't know that I would consider him like a ball hawk, but he's certainly able to track the ball. If the play is there to be made, he's going to make it.
He described himself as an old school safety, and I know a lot of Bears fans.
Yep.
When Bears fans hear that, Bears fans think of a great safety from yesteryear, and one that comes to a lot of mind is Mike Brown, who was a guy that played similar. He was a strong safety type, but he had some good ball skills as well. So if Brisker can kind of come in and fill that similar role, like you guys talk about, a do it all kind of guy. It's just such a great fit for what this Matt Eberflus defense wants to do.
And to me, the name that comes to mind, and I'm not saying he's going to be this level of player because I don't think that would be fair, but a larger version of a Bob Sanders, a guy that's really going to hunt the ball, whether that's in coverage or just coming downhill. He's going to throw his head in there and make some tackles, but he didn't miss many tackles. He's not going to go chasing the big hit and suddenly there's a guy 10 yards down the field. But really, really smart player who just, you look up and you're like, oh, look, he's around the ball again.
Clay said it. He's the next Bob Sanders.
Oh, man, that would be great.
Hey, if he's a 10-time Pro Bowler, I said it.
Yeah. Well, we'll give you credit, man. Well, any final thoughts or do you got another question, Lester?
We're good. I think with a Sanders is a good comp though, because they played in similar defenses. It's the Tampa 2 style of defense. What the Bears are doing this coming up season's not the same thing that, the Colts did back with Dungy and, the Bears, of course, did with Lovey, but it's similar schemes. It's similar mentality you want out of the safety position. And Brisker has that. With Clay talked about how he came from a JUCO. Those guys are fighting for everything. He wasn't a top recruit out of high school. He had to earn his stripes in Penn State, and he got there on campus, and he did just that.
And to me, I think it's lastly, the one thing I would note is it's important to note that he could have went to the draft last year. He probably would have been a 3rd or 4th round pick, but he would have tested well like he did this year, would have had good tape, but came back, made huge strides again, turned himself into a borderline 1st round pick. And I think that there's something to be said for players that are happy to push themselves and see whether there's a next level beyond that next level. So that while I think that Jaquan Brisker is ready for the NFL currently, I think that there could be a better player in there even more so.
Nice.
Awesome. Well, I love to hear that, man. That's good stuff. I'm so excited to watch him in camp and see him step on the field when the games crank up. But Clay, really appreciate the insight and really appreciate you jumping on here on a Sunday. We'll see you down the line. Maybe we'll keep drafting Penn State players.
Not a problem, guys. I appreciate the time.
Thanks, Clay.
See you.
The first thing he said was he's a good guy.
Yeah.
Right. Like he's a he's a good interview. He gives thoughtful answers. He's someone who worked really hard to get where he was. Again, I think we're starting to see what Ryan Poles is interested in bringing into this organization and how he's trying to shape the foundation of what his Chicago Bears are going to look like. And I think it's pretty interesting. I think it's pretty exciting.
Smart, heady football players, good athletic profile. This is a guy, like I talked about, he had to fight for everything he's got. And I didn't realize that he thought about coming out, last year. But that's another thing. That's, to me, that's a big plus in his corner, that he wanted to do a one more year. He wanted to, show what he had. And man, can you imagine if there's even more better football in front of him?
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Yeah, keep fighting, keep developing. Yeah, it's really interesting stuff. So, we'll wrap up here this podcast. That's a little insight into Jaquan Brisker, a little insight into Doug Kramer earlier in the show. Appreciate both of those guys jumping on. If you're interested in Big Ten football, I'd say that those guys are worth following. So,
the Champaign Room and the Black Shoe Diaries, both the SB Nation college sites. So it's good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't watch a lot of college football, but I appreciate these guys that really live and die this stuff and are able to jump on and give us some insight into these players. And of course, I won't be cheering for either Penn State or Illinois because you've got to cheer for the Hawkeyes. And he mentioned a Hawkeye, so at least he's in good class there. But what do you got going on at the site? Anything interesting that we want to make sure people know about?
Just today, the Bears actually made a couple roster moves, so that's up on the site right now. Actually, they made some tweaks with their undrafted free agents. And speaking of undrafted free agents, I'm actually going to be back here on Second City Gridiron and the podcast channel as well with Jacob Infante on Wednesday nights. I'm going to have Jacob on, who was, of course, our lead draft analyst, and he is going to break down all of the undrafted free agents the Bears got. I mean, we know pretty much the 11 draft picks pretty good by now. But let's learn a little bit more about these. I think it's 18 undrafted free agents. So I'm going to have Jacob on Wednesday. We're going to talk about that.
Good stuff. Well, we'll get out of here for the podcast. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, please go on and do that. Second City Gridiron. Follow us on Twitter as well. And we will see you down the line. And until next time, bear down. All right. Cool. Well,
Nice.
I don't know if anybody has any questions in the comments, but we'll take those real quick before we
There was
sign
one
off
asking
for good.
about Olin Kreutz RAS. I don't know if Olin has an RAS card, but those are really easy to find. You go to you can go to Twitter.
I'll look it up.
Yeah, you're gonna look it up now. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure he has one. I think I looked one time before, but
yeah. What else is there? Anything else?
And then another one about Brisker. Yeah, with John, I agree. It's nice that he could be a plug and play starter, but the fact that he has to be a plug and play starter is bad news for the Bears. Because, man, I mean, it's if they would have done a little more in free agency, I think that'd be better. But again, if the Bears are getting 2 plug and play starters on day 2 of the draft, that really ties the entire secondary together. And then you mentioned Cruikshank, and he is a good guy that comes in as a big nickel or a dime, because he does come in and he cover guys out of the slot to tight ends. And then you have a guy like DeAndre Houston Carson, who I think is a good serviceable backup. He can kind of play that do it all role back there as well. Oh, there's Kreutz right there.
Now the film on Kreutz coming out was great.
Yeah,
I mean, so you got to remember that. I mean, this guy's a football player,
3rd round draft pick, but he was just even in college he was a nasty guy. Just he played with an edge.
Right, but the testing numbers, weren't quite as good.
Yeah.
But I mean,
undersized was Kreutz coming out. I remember that knock on him. When he came out, they said that, and but I'm not trying to compare Cramer and Kreutz, because that's we're talking about a borderline Hall of Fame guy in Kreutz and a guy who just was a 6th round draft pick. But you do see some of the same technical stuff from both those guys coming out. Kreutz was undersized. He was a technically sound player. Kramer's kind of got that as well. He got some stuff to clean up, of course, but it was I'm excited on all of the Bears day 3 draft picks. There's a lot of guys there, and who knows? I mean, like Drew said earlier, if just one of those guys hits, that's a win, because you don't expect your day 3 guys to come in and be big time contributors. But the way things are lined up now, one of those guys could be starting.
Yeah, and I mean, I get what you're saying. I get what John's saying, that it's not there's no competition for him, so it's easy to fill a blank void, like you're saying. But I also
The potential's there. The upside's
like
there with
he's
him.
he's got upside, right? Yeah, and this could be a guy that I mean, I'm excited to see what he looks like next to Eddie. Okay, I love Eddie Jackson. I know that's not a popular opinion. I know he's had a couple rough years, but still love the player, and you want to see if that unlocks him. If it doesn't, it's also an Eddie Jackson replacement, right? Like Eddie Jackson, may not, if he can't come back up to that level of play, then Eddie Jackson may be, on the chopping block next year. So, this roster is going to be reimagined. I'm kind of remembering stories about when Ditka was hired and came in like one of his first team meetings or his first team meeting, basically said something to the effect of "Look around because most of you guys are going to be here next year."
Yeah.
And it's like it's kind of that, right? I mean, you're in a new regime. There's a lot of this is a gap year, whatever you want to call it, where they're not necessarily expecting.
I
to
like
compete for-
reset. That's what I call it. I call it the reset year.
I called it a soft reset, and
I like gap year too. Yeah,
Brandon said, "What's soft about it?" I was like, "It just doesn't feel like a hard reset because you're not getting any quarterback." So kind of a gap year to try to reset the books a little bit. But yes, a reset, a gap year, whatever you want to say. I think that this year can be a lot of fun, though. It might not be a lot of fun in the win-loss record, but it's going to be a lot of fun to see what these guys have, to see this culture change, and see where this goes and see if it works. I'm really excited.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, the draft was, I wasn't as excited about all the picks, at the time, but the more I go into them, I look at them, I see what they're bringing to the Bears, and then of course, the mini camp happens and the players are talking, the coaches are talking. It's hard as a fan not to get excited. And of course, yes, this is the time of year when everyone's excited. It's a time for hope, but I'm okay with that. I'm a Bears fan first and foremost. I want to see my team win, and right now we do have some hope. There is something there. Justin Fields, the arrow is pointing up for him. The offense, the arrow is pointing up for the offense. Velus Jones, as upset as most Bears fans were at that pick, I think we're envisioning what they can do with him. He's not going to be a top tier guy. He's coming in to fill a role. And again, 3rd round draft pick. He's not a top pick. You're not expecting him to come in and be a top dog from the start, but coming in a nice role within the offense. Some other guys who will help some other guys fall into place within what they want to do. It's exciting right now. So let's be excited.
Yeah, it's one thing to say, I just wish they would have drafted Hall of Famers with every pick, and I wish they would have drafted 5 wide receivers, and it's just I don't know. I'm pretty okay with what happened, and I'm getting more and more excited as I learn more about these young men and what they're bringing to the team, and what Poles' vision is. And I think that's what we're trying to do is trying to figure that stuff out and share that and try to help piece that stuff together. So. If you guys like this sort of thing, again, we'll keep trying to track down some of these college guys, and see if we can bring some more on to get some insight. Might be hard to find some of these smaller schools, but we'll reach out to them and see if we can bring on some beat writers and see what's going on. It's a little easier with the Power 5.
Yeah,
won't lie. But good stuff. I think we can probably close it out here. And any final thoughts from you?
Sounds good. It's Mother's Day. I got to go spend some time with my wife.
Yeah, I gotta go eat. I gotta go get dinner going. So,
There you go.
all right, guys, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it, and we'll see you soon.